I went to a speech in Ann Arbor. Ronald Reagan gave a speech there. It was purely accidental that I wound up there. And so he spoke. I remember one of the local NAACP presidents asking a question, and it was a little private, intimate gathering. And the question was, what he was going to do for Black America. And I never forget that toothy Ronald Reagan grin when he said, I'm not going to do anything differently for Black America than I would for any American. And I was sold.
Jimmy Green is a man who believes in a merit-based society. He led a movement in the state of Michigan for a more competitive work environment when he became a leader for the Associated Builders and Contractors, also known as ABC.
In order to be powerful, people have to understand what you are, who you represent, and what your core values are. And nobody knew that about ABC. They were just this little secret society of contractors. And as I got to understand really what they were all about, they were free enterprise fighters. I called them the freedom fighters.
Jimmy has a strong belief in free enterprise in America, especially in his home state of Michigan. When he took over as a leader with ABC, he was in a unique role.
And I imagine being the only and first, and now still the only Black man to ever lead an Association Builders and Contractors chapter, I wanted to be viewed as a merit. Not that anybody hired me because I was Black. They hired me because I was really, really good at my job. As a matter of fact, I would say I was exceptional at my job. I mean, who wouldn't want to be merit shop driven or based on merit, whether you're in nursing or recreation or retail or sports for that matter, which of course to me is the greatest merit shop industry there is. You're a great quarterback, you get to start. Lousy quarterback, you hit the bench. That's all centered around merit.
Jimmy said the state of Michigan was controlled by organized labor in close association with state government. And Jimmy said if you got out of line, you got blacklisted.
I have to admit, maybe that's a sick part of me. I was absolutely challenged by that. The fact that the conditions for merit shop contractors was abysmal. At the time, then Governor Jennifer Granholm had what they called a blacklist. And so she would literally use the departments under state government to discriminate, to create what they call these black marks. So they would send out OSHA inspectors, come to a merit shop work site and cite them for the most frivolous thing. Now here's why that was important for them. Because once they cited you, you had to cease work and you could not bid on additional state work until you cleared that citation. Well, guess what? You didn't get a hearing to clear that citation. They were using governmental departments to weaponize and to work on behalf of union contractors. And again, I talk about this in pragmatic terms because to the victor go the spoils. They had state government right up under their fingernails, and they used them. They used them to compete what I thought was unfair practices by vacating the opportunity for merit shop contractors to bid on work, which to me was a disservice to taxpayers. So for me, I always argue from that perspective that it was the taxpayer who was being jilted in this war between union and non-union contractors. I didn't have a problem with a union contractor winning a bid, provided that it was a low bid and it didn't sacrifice safety, quality, timeliness. What's the big deal?
So in 2012, the state of Michigan passed right-to-work laws that allowed workers who worked in unionized environments to opt out of paying union dues and fees. And this was a huge deal for merit shops because it leveled the playing field and it created this open environment for competition.
If you make it too costly to employ union labor, there's going to have to be some substitute. Either the capital is going to relocate. Since 1947, when the Taft-Hartley Act allowed states to become right-to-work states, employers, if you're going to set up a new factory especially, you're going to do so in a right-to-work state. If you look at where, say, Japanese automakers have located their plants in the United States, they've tended to avoid pro-union states. It can take a while because, although today, since capital is a lot more mobile than it used to be, it was hard to relocate auto factories and steel mills. But the kind of geographical mobility the capital has today means it's a lot easier for companies to relocate in places that are more flexible.
In general, union membership is lower in right-to-work states, but right-to-work laws don't necessarily translate into lower union membership. In 2012, union leaders said this was legislation aimed at trying to eliminate labor unions.
That was never the preface behind right to work. It was always a simple question: would you like to belong to a union? If somebody did, and that's one of the principles about Merit Shop that I loved. When you're in free enterprise, you can't be anti-something. So if you're a free enterprise theorist, you can't be anti-union. The idea is to respect people who make choices that are best for them. And it's about putting food on your table ethically and legally. And if somebody decided they wanted a collective bargaining agreement to do it, great. But it shouldn't come at the expense of Merit Shop contractors who chose just the opposite.
The state of Michigan has long been known as a mainstay of organized labor. So when right to work came up for a vote, chaos broke out at the Capitol.
I'm usually pretty brave, but I knew then that that this was getting bad because they were overturning vehicles and cars, and they had beat up a guy, a vendor out front that seemed to be more predisposed toward Merit Shop contractors. There was just a lot of that kind of stuff, and I remember standing up in the building, looking down, and seeing all the state police that were covering the Capitol at the time, and so it made it almost impossible for us to be able to walk into. And so we didn't, and the police even told us that. They said, look, we're not going to be able to guard all these guys. I mean, there were just 100,000 union guys out there, and there was no way they were going to be able to protect us.
Right-to-work laws, they don't ban unions, and they don't stop unions from servicing the interests of their members. But rather, right-to-work laws require unions to give workers a choice about financially supporting those efforts. But during the legislative process, the tensions and anger are so high, they rule the day.
I sat up there and watched that vote, and then the police had to escort us out because they were just incredibly angry. And it was a tense time, a tough time, and I got to tell you, it was a little time. There were some times when I was really nervous about my safety as well, too.
So in Michigan, what should have been a statewide debate about free enterprise and free markets really turned into a politically charged ideological turf war.
At the time, even our state senator, who was a minority leader, who is now our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, stood on those steps, again, citing kind of incendiary language that just was not true.
We're not afraid. We know that what they're doing is anti-worker, anti-family, anti-woman, and the way they're doing it, anti-American.
And you could watch these people getting fueled and angry. These are leaders literally pouring forth a bunch of people with misinformation, and that's exactly what happened with right to work. It happened with prevailing wage. It happened with project labor agreements. It happened here with people just fueling these folks with unfair information. And I think that's what created all this hostility and a lot of personal hatred.
In our own state of Michigan here, we've just been through this. Michigan became a right-to-work state. It was incredible. The state that was the cradle of modern industrial unionism and the United Auto Workers became a right-to-work state, and we just reversed that last year.
Before it was repealed, right-to-work laws in Michigan cost the labor unions about $50 million in dues. While union memberships over the past 40 years have declined, political influence from unions has actually expanded across the country.
They're going to be like this. Who's going to win here in the long run? You're better off sitting down and let's get a contract and let's move on with this world. In today's world, I'll cripple you. I will cripple you.
I've said this before, I repeat it again. When I spoke to you about a year ago, you literally built this country. Every investment banker in America would go on strike. Not a whole hell of a lot would happen. But guess what? If you all went on strike nationwide, the country'd shut down. Shut down.
That being pro-family means we support access to good union jobs, affordable housing, health care, and higher education.
The disconnect really happened when you start a union, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector, whatever. Usually those things start to represent workers. Usually they start to get better wages or working conditions, or perhaps there's another issue that comes about as a reason to unionize. But what happens over the course of time is they figure out that they can take so much money, use it on politics, and then use that influence to go and pursue a political agenda, that the union boss, once they change over, they start to hire political people that care about politics more than they do in wages and working conditions.
Nearly all unions are involved in political activism, but the one that touches most Americans, teachers' unions. You know, there's this old saying, if you want to know what's important to a person or a group, follow the money. Where do they spend their money?
The National Education Association, in 2022, I believe, we studied their public disclosure report, we studied their annual tax filing, and we found out in there that 7.5% of their budget went towards representational activities. Most of their budget went to lobbying, political gifts, and gifts to nonprofits, 501c3s and C4s, and most of those were to advance a political agenda. They cannot sit there with a straight face and say that their primary objective is to represent workers when they spend just 7.5% of their budget on it. In fact, it's a complete afterthought for them.
It's the whole woke ideology. You know, they want to be environmentally and socially and governmentally correct with their ESG, and so they don't look at reality, investing in the areas that are actually going to bring a good return on investment for retired teachers or others. They look at what is going to make them look, they're virtue signaling. They want to look good to their people. The whole thing is sad and unfortunate that they're choosing politics over people.
I mean, this is 10% of the workforce leaving their union in 6 years. It's a big deal. So workers are waking up to this, and the more that unions continue to go to the left and appease whatever is left of their membership, the more workers are going to leave.
They would absolutely rather play ball with Democrats because they are ideologically completely and thoroughly aligned with liberal policies, not only in the way that they do business, but in the causes they support around here in the States and around the world.
Can you have a free market and unions? Maybe. I don't have the answer, but I do know that as a people we need to do better, and the free market is usually the answer to just about everything.
History has shown us that unions are almost monolithically aligned with the left. However, in states like Ohio, where Republicans control almost everything, the unions have to play ball. So they've started to aggressively contribute to Republicans here in the Buckeye State, which is interesting given the fact that unions and Republicans are almost always at odds.
And we used to say that unions rented a few Republicans back in the day. And then about maybe 10 years ago, we'll say, they began to stop renting and taking up purchasing. And that has continued. And the reason is very simple. It's not that the union's leadership, and let's be sure we distinguish between union leadership and rank and file individuals within any particular union. But union leadership in certain of the types of unions that typically play in the public sphere have more recently determined that the Republicans are in power for the foreseeable future, and therefore they have attempted to not just playing footsie with a few Republicans, but tried to inundate more of the class and contribute to them in ways that indicate that there is a wholesale attempt to block certain policies and procedures politically in Ohio by the sheer volume of the political investment.
Balance, right? You have, on one hand, well-funded special interests, politics, power, money. On the other side, you have taxpayer value, economic reality, and probably the biggest issue in this whole thing, freedom in the workplace.
there's going to have to be a system change, a reboot. I don't really know what that looks like, but from a really funny British comedy that I like, have you tried turning it on and off again, right? Maybe we just need to turn the system off and then back on. I don't know what that looks like. I would like to think that we can move in a better direction together, but I remember de Tocqueville said, America is great because America is good. We need to get back to that moral foundation, because where we are right now is anywhere but.
Again, I'm happy for anybody to work the way they want to. It's a free country, happy for them to do that. The challenge here is, I believe, we should always have a good sense to choose the best product for the best price. And I think anybody gets that. Whether you're buying a car or buying, a bag of potato chips, I think people will generally choose for themselves the best value proposition. I think we should maintain that. And so if unions want to work the way they want to do it, have at it. It's a free country. If you can do your work great and you compete in the open market, no problem. Have at it. And so same way with building a car. So I think that's the message. We're open for business for anybody and everybody, but we're not going to favor. We're not going to tilt the scale. We should not tilt the scale. And so that takes discipline from lawmakers, because all of us could be bought. Not all of us are bought.